Oh, here I am, I think. Hello. Good morning. I think I'm going live here. Just getting things set up here and adjusted the way I like it. Good morning. Hello. Let's see. My mic looks pretty hot, but I think I'll leave it as it is in case it bothers anybody. Let me know if it does. And I know the background music's still going. Let me close that. All right, so cool. So this is my first day actually streaming with my full command center battle station setup. So I've got a lot of things to look at here, and it's exciting. In fact, I have actually 3 different computers being emulated by this one computer right now so that I can demonstrate some things. So I've got a pretty elaborate setup here that hopefully will go pretty smoothly and you won't even notice, but just I'm excited about today in terms of the technology. So good morning and welcome to Electronic Literature, the class. This is section 1. I'm getting started at 10:10 or so. Thanks for saying good morning, everyone that's saying good morning. Good to see you all here. It is a nice morning, I guess. A nice-ish morning. It's raining, but it's not super cold, so that's kind of nice. And I'm eager to check out. I've seen a few daffodils in my front yard that are almost blooming, and so I'm excited to see if they're out today. I haven't had a chance to look yet. They were real close yesterday. Speaking of things in my yard, I did turn off the bird cam because it's raining, and so it's got a lot of moisture in the lens, and it just looks really blurry. So I haven't seen any birds either, so I don't think we're missing anything. But just FYI, if in fact a bird shows up, I might switch it on. But it's just, I'll just show you what it looks like. It's pretty bad. I'll pull it to the front there. Yeah, it's really blurry, and it keeps trying to focus, and so it's kind of distracting the way it's doing that. So I'm just gonna hide that for now. Okay, so here's my plan for today. It's a little different or it may be different than what you're expecting because what you did to prepare for class today is you read chapter 3 of, I have props. Yeah, you read chapter 3 of Electronic Literature. And, I'm mirrored, aren't I? Okay, I guess so. So this is the book by Scott Redberg. You read the first part of chapter 3, I should say. And the first part covers 2 important contexts for understanding hypertext. He looks at the literary context, specifically modernism and postmodernism, and then he looks at the technological context, and specifically things like HTML, which is the more conventional, or the way that we're used to experiencing hypertext now. Hypertext is the H and the T in HTML, and also the H and the T in HTTP. Whenever I type a URL, or when you type a URL from beginning to end, if you start with HTTP, you are typing the word hypertext in there implicitly with hypertext. So we experience hypertext all the time. What we're going to be talking about, though, in this week and a little bit next week, is the literary genre of literary hypertext, and that includes more things than the web version of hypertext as you're familiar with it. So what I'm going to be doing today is actually demonstrating several different platforms for using hypertext. Actually, mainly one specific platform for creating and experiencing hypertext that predates the web and does work in some pretty different ways, and yet may look a little familiar to you somewhat if you've started working with Twine or if you've ever experienced that way of seeing hypertext. So in order to accomplish this, I've got two simulated computers running on my real computer. And you can see one of them right here. This is my Windows 98 computer that I have running, and I also have a Mac OS 9 behind it right now running a hypertext work. And I'm going to be spending most of the time today doing what I call, what is called a traversal of several of these hypertexts, basically a demo. And it's not a full traversal. I won't have time to do a full traversal of any of these, but I wanted to show you how these different texts operate. And operate is an important verb here. So that's something that I will be demonstrating to give you a sense of how these things work. Now, you'll be reading about some of these works as you go ahead in chapter 3, so we'll be talking about that going forward for the rest of this week. But I wanted to show you them in the sense that I can show you them now because it's easier for me to do this from this computer and sending it out on the stream as opposed to in person on Wednesday. So I wanted to get you this information ahead of learning much more about it, if that makes sense. I do wish, and unfortunately it's not easy for you to experience these works yourself. I wish it were easier, or I wish I could do something if we had a lot of time, and if it were possible to do this, I would set up a computer in a classroom and just invite you all to come in and try it yourself at different points, but just the logistics of that would be prohibitively complicated at this point, and just in terms of access and cleaning, it would be a bunch of issues. So it's unfortunately not really possible right now. And also these works, you could buy them yourself and try to run them yourselves, but it's unfortunately not easy. It's not straightforward to get these things running. I had to spend most of the day yesterday to get these demos prepared for you today. So it's not something that I can let you experience yourself directly. But I hope that by demoing it, you'll get a good sense of how these things work and start to appreciate kind of why this genre is what it is and how it tends to operate. So I'm actually going to show you. Let me hide this for a second. Let me hide my emulator. And I do have a few slides here, really just to kind of give you the roadmap of what's going on today. I'm not even going to share this. But I do want to, I should mention this. I'm going to be demoing several hypertext works from the, one goes back to 87 and then a few from the 90s. One from the latest one is the year 2000, as you'll see. So these are what you might consider classic or, in most cases, first generation hypertext works. These are serious, like adult literature, and so as such, they do deal with some serious themes. Whether or not I encounter any of those themes depends on choices I make as I'm working my way through it. I just wanted to make sure that you're aware that many of these do have some kind of trauma in them, and I think that's actually interesting as a thing. It's not something that it's not coincidental just because I chose these particular works, but it is a theme that recurs throughout hypertext in this period, and I have a few theories about why that is. One is that as a genre is trying to prove itself, you see this with indie games, for example, in the early 2000s, like the late aughts especially. Indie video games that are trying to be literary do tend to deal with really serious, kind of depressing themes and about life and death and trauma. I think there's a similar thing going on in hypertext, but also in the late 80s and early 90s. But in that sense also, these are novelists, like these are professional novelist, and the kind of way of writing, or the thing that people are writing novels about in the context of literary fiction in the late 80s and early 90s does deal with a lot of serious stuff, like a lot of trauma. So I think that's part of it. Another thing, though, I think that's even more important, though, is the idea that hypertext is a particular way of presenting a fictional scenario. And I even hesitate to use the word story because, as you'll see, it doesn't always have the characteristics that we would expect from storytelling. It's a very fragmented way of experiencing something, and I think that there is something to that. People who study trauma in literature notice how things like flashbacks or things like a mixed up sense of time can sometimes accompany trauma, because that's something that people really experience with PTSD. So I think in a way when hypertext performs something that's traumatic, it's a way of bearing witness to that trauma using the format of the medium, if that makes sense. It's kind of a speculative hypothesis there, but I don't think I'm completely wrong in that. So this is just a warning. Okay, so these are the works I'm going to be talking about today, and if you look at the collaborative notes doc, let's see, section 1 here, I've already made headings for each of these, and I invite you as I demonstrate these to fill in these headings with some of the details. These aren't actually in the same order as I've written them in the slides here, but that's I've got the names of the authors and the dates here. At least you should make sure to know that, but also maybe say a couple words, and whoever feels motivated to certainly can do this. A few words or sentences describing the major topics or themes of each of these works, maybe even quoting it if you see a memorable quote pop up or if I mention one. These are things that it's creating more material for the quiz. Okay, and then before I move on to that, just in case I get kind of caught up in some of the readings, I want to mention the homework. And so for the homework, I've adjusted the schedule slightly. I would like for you to look at 12 Blue on to prepare for Wednesday. On Wednesday, we will be able to talk about 12 Blue and My Body of Wonder Camera and do a bit of compare and contrast between those two. And that's my goal for Wednesday. But not just compare and contrast, but really to study these works and try to understand why they're presented the way they are. 12 Blue is a complicated work, and they're all complicated, but for 12 Blue, I really recommend a couple of reading strategies. One is keep track of the characters as you see them whenever you see a name. There's lots and lots of cases in 12 Blue where you'll read a passage, Alexia, and it's going to just have pronouns in it, like he and she. And so it's sometimes debatable who is being referred to there, but I think you'll have a better time navigating that if you keep track of the names of the characters. And so Samantha is one of the named characters in the work. I recommend kind of keeping track of your own character list, but also it might be helpful to just kind of sketch out like a family tree, like who's related to who used to be married to who, whose child is that, and like that kind of thing will help you navigate it, I think, pretty well. It's a hypertext work that you experience by exploring. Let me show you this. This is kind of the graphic that organizes it, or sort of, and you can start by clicking anywhere in here. And actually this is a good one, but the text is written blue on blue, light blue on dark blue. It is kind of hard to read visually after a while, I find, but it's not terrible. I'm just making it bigger so it shows up well on the stream here. These are the links you can see because they are underlined, but check this out. So if I click on this one, it takes me here. You'll often find yourself on this page, but if you go back, now that that's a visited link, that link is the same color as the background. It's actually still there. If you drag like that, you can select it and see it, but it's the same color as the background, so it's effectively disappeared, at least visually. Now, whenever you get to this screen, or there's a couple others that feel like dead ends, you can always kind of jump back somewhere else by clicking on one of these different strands over here on the left, and that'll kind of take you out of that hole, if you will, to try something else. But you may feel like you end up there a lot. This is Samantha, right? That's one of the named characters. So keep track of those things. It's the kind of work where you explore it until you feel like you know it well enough to be done with it. And that's going to depend, the amount of time that takes will depend a lot on your choices and your reading speed and your interest in different parts of it. One question you should try to know an answer to, though, and that is, there is at least one murder in this work. Someone named Ed Stanko is murdered. So if you haven't figured out yet who murders Ed Stanko, you might want to keep reading until you do. Like, keep exploring until you're able to answer that question. But don't answer that question in the Google Doc, right? Don't put that in the Discord or the Google Doc to spoil it for everybody. This is kind of your, I don't want to say MacGuffin, but it's the kind of thing that keeps you reading, hopefully. It's not really a mystery story, though. It's not really a whodunit kind of thing. It's just that's to get to that particular piece of information, you have to get pretty deep into the work, and that's what I want you to do, is get pretty deep into the work. So see if you can answer that question. If you can, that doesn't mean you're done necessarily, but if you can't, then you should probably keep reading, if that makes sense. Okay, so that's 12 Blue. If you have questions or issues with it, let me know. The main thing that I think people find is that it's just visually kind of tiring to look at. But we'll do some things to study it on Wednesday. Cool, so I'm going to switch into emulation mode here and show you some of these works. I'm going to start with, turn this off. Yeah, there we go. I'm going to start with my Mac computer here, and I know it's kind of small. I'm going to see if I can make the text bigger. I'm not sure if I can do it in the emulator itself, but I will try. Let me just go and quit this, actually. So this, as you can see, this is a different computer's desktop, or it looks like one. This is a Mac OS 9. So the Macs that you're using now are OS 10 and later, and they are totally different. Like the CPU, everything is very, very different on Macs. And so to get a Mac that's OS 9 or earlier to run, it takes some work. And this is actually, it wasn't too bad to get that part of it running. The trick was getting the media into this. So I have on here, I do have the physical media for this. This was published as, these two works were published together as the Eastgate Quarterly Review of Hypertext and Volume 1, Number 2. And so this is two short works. One's called Lust by Mary Kim Arnold, and the other is called I Have Said Nothing by J. Yellowlees Douglas. These are both published by Eastgate. Eastgate is a software company that publishes StorySpace, which is the software that I'm about to demo right now. It's the software that these two authors used to create these hypertext works, and it's also the software that we use to read these works. There's kind of a creation mode and a reading mode for StorySpace. There are several different options when you create a work with StorySpace, and so you're going to actually see several different versions of choices that these authors have made in preparing their work using StorySpace. I'm going to start with Lust because I think it's the most straightforward of these in terms of what it presents to you. So here we go. This gives us Actually, well, I'll just to continue my show and tell. These are on a floppy disk, right? So 3.5-inch floppy. That was the trick to getting this onto my computer. That was the biggest challenge. There's also published this little literary journal pamphlet with it. That's actually a review of a review essay about these two works. So pretty interesting. Cool. So there we go. So we're going to begin the reading here with this software, and let me see, I'm going to see if maybe I can make this a little bigger, just in the view here. Let me try it. Let me see. Let's see if I can keep it kind of in this region of my OBS screen. So let's begin a new reading. All right. So this should work fine, I think. Can I move this down even more? Yeah. All right. So there's several little widgets and windows that appear as you are reading this work. So this is kind of your toolbar, and then this is the actual text. I'll read some parts of this. Nearly naked this summer night, sweet and heavy, he comes to her. This night she follows him, sweat between them. They speak of the child and the summer sun with words that yield to the touch. So that phrase at the end, words that yield to the touch, there's a bit of an erotic context, as you can tell from the preceding text. But the idea of a word yielding to touch is also what I'm about to do by reading this work, by traversing it as hypertext. Now, we're used to hypertext where you see links in a different color or font that indicates that you can click on it and you can go somewhere else. For story space, that's not always the case. Sometimes it is, and authors can choose that if they want. Sometimes it's not the case. And sometimes you can answer a question and you can type it here in this field. Sometimes there's a yes or no question, so you could click Y or N. You can also look at a list of all of the links on this page. So links have what's called a guard field, a name, and a destination. And so they have three different parts of it. The guard field is like the text that you would see to click on here. So many of these words in this particular passage are links. In fact, like most of them. So what happens is if you click on a specific one or double click on it because we're on a Mac, it'll take you to the target of that particular link. Notice that choice I made was not like you might encounter a typical link choice in a Twine work where you have a clear sense of what's going to happen when you click on it. For many of these story-based works, you're really just exploring a text almost by intuition or sense. You're not usually making decisions, although sometimes you are. So this Lexia is titled Michael. Orange juice kisses in summer sun. She remembers him with a faint longing, wanting nothing like love, nothing like sweat or wind. And when the traces of salty sweet lay on her skin like a blanket of breath and tears, she thinks of him, always thinking of him. I find it difficult to be alone with you now. I find it difficult to be alone. So many of these words are going to be active links. If not, you can always just double click anywhere. Well, maybe not. Or hit enter anyway. And there's always a default next passage. Like it'll have one that's just like the default next one, but if you click on a specific place, it might take you somewhere different. But you don't know where those are. They're kind of like hidden Easter eggs almost. Jeffrey had a past. He wrapped it around him like a blanket to keep him warm, to keep him safe from harm, the blanket of steel, less penetrable than the surface of his skin. I told him it didn't matter to me. I wanted to know all of him, not just the good things, the dark side too. He told me I had seen one too many movies. So let's see if we click on the word movies. That might be interesting. John, no? John had sand-colored hair and eyes of sea. He drove a motorcycle, never wore a helmet. I am a dyed-in-the-wool Republican, he said. Innocence. She follows him that night, running into the street, blindly, tears streaming down her cheeks, heaving wildly. So if you look here, you can see that there are two different destinations from this particular passage. So we can go to somewhere called Innocent, like we're in a passage called Innocence right now, so we can go somewhere called Innocent, or we can click on This Night and go to a passage called This Night. So that would be probably this guard field. Yeah. This night is sunless, there's sweat between them, they are undressed, the blanket is fraying, woolen fibers. So you can kind of make different choices. Like you can pull up the links list here, and then that can help you get a sense of where you're going just by the names of those things. Or you can essentially click on words that you think are interesting. And as the prologue says, perhaps they will yield to the touch. They will yield something, but what they yield might depend on what the author has programmed here. She remembers his face from a long time ago. I always feel like I want to peek at what the actual options are here. So the other thing you can see, I think she wishing, I think that's the default next one, and then we can go from soft flesh or there. Other works, so this is, I think this is probably a good enough demo of this work. It's an interesting one. It's fairly short, so I've almost in my traversal right now, I've seen most of it already. I think, and it's a work that does have kind of loops and recursion. So there are things that feel similar, although they're kind of different. Go ahead and save my reading, I suppose. Let's take a look at I Have Said Nothing, which is also fairly short, but introduces a different reading modality for story space. So it has this title screen, and then it also gives us this view of the work. And this view is a lot like what Jane Douglas would have seen as she was writing this work. And you can see all of the lexia that composed this work spread out on a map. And this looks a lot like the Twine editor if you've used that. You can see each passage linked together. And as you can see, these links have names, and the name of the link appears between the two works. I can actually move these around in this view. It's not quite as slick and quick to update as Twine, but it does work okay. And you can move it around and see these different things. And then I can also click on this passage if I want to see it. So this is Deja Vu, and I guess it's empty. But sometimes within these works you can get a little bit lost, and so they do have the option. Some of them include this little kind of compass thing here that I can use to move around in it. It lets me jump from passage to passage. Hopefully, if I can click on it, there we go. And so you can see which passage has focus. It's this one. It's very small on my screen. This has the title Fucked Up. And if I click on the next one, it'll just take me to whatever the default next one is. And you can kind of move through the text this way by clicking next every time, or you can click this one too. It is possible for works to be on different layers on a z-axis. Right now we can see them spread out this way, and so I can traverse this map essentially using these arrow keys, left and right. The up and down, though, don't work in this particular map because it's only one level. I think there's only one level. There might be, I think I might be able to go up actually. Yeah, I can go up, but not down. And what we're doing is we're zooming in and zooming out of the text. So right now we're kind of zooming out to the passage above all of these passages, or the lexia, and then we can kind of move back into it. In one of the works I'm about to show you, that in and out and up and down movement is very important. Okay, so I should probably start this over again, this particular work. Can I redo it? Let me just, so I can actually give you a sense of what this is about. I Have Said Nothing by J. Ulysses Douglas. And it has sort of an hourglass shape to these, but that's all right. So this one does not have the same little text navigation thing where you can enter text, or that you can click yes or no, but you can accomplish the same things essentially by clicking here. Okay, so these are the links from here. We can go what or which. Let's go with what. Do you remember Sherry? Remember Sherry, my brother Luke's piece, the one who got into that god-awful tangle with him at Paychecks and Hamtramck? Hamtramck? The one who threw that half-empty bottle of Beefeater gin at his head when he told her to stop drinking? The one who folded up like an old coat and skidded, flapping down the length of the basement wall when he elbowed her square into the solar plexus? Hell, you remember Sherry, I'm sure. Thing is, she's dead. Shit, it was bound to happen, I suppose. Too much gin, too many Vivarin. Remember how we used to eat those getting ready for exams, in the belief that nothing can touch you? The cars will always scream towards you like something out of a Warner Brothers cartoon, but they'll just stop like that too. The cowcatcher of the locomotive quivering just inches away from Bugs Bunny and the whole 9 yards. I guess she thought Warner Brothers took their ideas from life, or life took its ideas from Warner's. I can't pronounce French. Actually, it took a hell of a lot if you ask me. It took about 4 quarts of Beefeater gin, as well as a handful of Black Beauties, not to mention incredibly bad timing and 6-inch spike heels. So this, I think that gives you enough, actually, of this work. There's been an accident. There's been a person, Sherry, who has been hit by a car. And what you see as you continue to explore this work is the event itself happens or is described somewhere in here, in kind of the middle of the hourglass. And these different arms of passages kind of moving towards the middle. So we can start here with anatomy. Oops, how do I get back up out of this view? I don't want to go in, I want to go back up. It is one particular view of this scene, right? So this is kind of the anatomical description of what happened to her. It's pretty violent. But each of these different tentacles almost of this work are different people's ideas about what happened, and they all kind of merge together in the middle. It's pretty interesting and messy looking, and that's kind of how an accident would work. So Eli has a question. That's Mary Kim Arnold. I can pull my slide back up if you want, but Mary hyphen Kim, so it's like Mary Kim and then Arnold. And this is I Have Said Nothing by J. Yellow Lees Douglas, which is actually her pen name. Her professional name is Jane Douglas. My story, by the way, is, well, a kind of anecdote is that I got into hypertext sort of accidentally in the late 90s in high school because I was searching on the AOL web for information about James Joyce, the author, and I happened across some information about Michael Joyce, and I was like, oh, this is crazy, and this is amazing. So I got some hypertext works, including this one, the Hypertext Quarterly Review of Hypertext, Eastgate Quarterly Review of Hypertext. Read this work. I wrote, ended up writing an undergrad paper where I talked a lot about I Have Said Nothing and analyzed it, and also a book. There's a book by J. Lees Douglas that she wrote called The End of Books. And then I went to grad school at the University of Florida, and I was applying there for various reasons, but then it was like after I had been accepted, I realized that Jane Douglas worked there, and she was in that department, and she just went by a different name. I did not realize that until I actually was enrolled as a student. So she ended up being my thesis advisor as a MA student. So cool. Anyway, so these are two story space hypertext works, and I'm emulating them right now on a Mac. There is a Windows version of this as well, of story space, and I'm going to show you a couple works using that system now. So I'm going to switch off my Mac, well, not switch it off, but hide it, and I'm going to take a look now at my Windows 98 computer, which I need to actually find. Here, there it is. Okay, and I will probably need to move in on this one too, just to make it a little bit more visible. But I've got 3 different works loaded here. I'm going to start looking at Samplers by Dina Larson. So it's here. Where did I put it? Yeah, so it's already installed. Yeah, Windows 98. Right, okay, so this work is the Windows 98 version of StorySpace, but you'll see a lot of the same elements, but just dressed up in the Windows iconography and sort of button schemas and so on. But the same functions exist, just with slight differences. So for this work, this is the physical version of it. It's based on quilt patterns. Sorry, it's mirrored, but this is Dina Larson. You can see her name on the screen too. And Dina Larson has written this work to mimic quilt patterns. So you can see different quilt square patterns here. I don't know if you know much about quilting, but you make usually you will make a square, and then you'll make a series of squares, and then you stick them all together to make a large like blanket quilt. Oftentimes people will make these collaboratively, so like you could bring your square to a collaborative quilt making event, and then you put it all together, and then you've got a big quilt. Anyway, so that's a visual metaphor that Dina Larson is exploring in this work. So I might need to make this bigger as well. Let me just go over here. I'm running this in VirtualBox, which is a little bit clunky sometimes, I think, but it does seem to go okay. I'm going to make this bigger, hopefully not too big to see, and I'll move that up here so it's not out of view. It's just kind of fidgety with all these windows here. Okay, I think I can make this one bigger. Yeah, okay. All right, so we can see, I'll hide this here, but you can see that Lexia view. It's actually full color here because this is a Windows computer. It says you can click on any image for a specific story, or you can always press enter to take you to the next link. So these are the names of the different short stories, essentially. So these are essentially 9 short stories collected together, and they have themes that link together. But here you can actually see the same kind of structure that I showed you in the Mac version, but this actually has labels for what each of these are. So this is the path, so that's the name of the connection between 2 things. And the destination is first, in this case, this is the name of the Lexia that we're going to if we follow this link. And then what is available in the thing to click on is just named text to link. It doesn't actually tell you what the text is of that guard field, but that's where you would click. So we can actually figure something out. But what's really interesting is in this particular work, and it's kind of hard to get because this is pretty abstract, but Dina Larson has written it so that the names of the paths that are available to follow, so remember that's a list of all of the links that appear on a particular Lexia, the names of those links listed together create another story. So you can see that here, like these are the titles: Mystic Knot, Seed Voices, Century Cross, and so on. Also available here are a series of links that have these names, which are named. Read these links and that's one here. And then another link is called And You'll Understand, and another one's called Just How Fragile, and another one's called These Memories Are. So you can actually read this as another layer of the narrative, or almost a paratext of the text. So read these links and you'll understand just how fragile these memories are. Everything hangs together on threads of light, patterns of electrons, sewn into arcane codes which will slowly fade into old visions of silver and silicon meaning nothing. So let's take a look at Firewheel. So this is a quilt pattern, and it has this kind of radial structure to it, right? So this is an image, and we can do what we would normally do by clicking our way through this. They or their ancestors dance here since the beginning. They laugh, clasp hands, and give their bodies up to their fox god. Smiling serenely, the little stone god does not move. Sometimes the children run before it, slurping melons and throwing gaily colored paper deep into the flames. So these are links, right? So these, the red text in this case are links, but this is something Dina Larson has chosen to make possible. And we can kind of click in and out. And if you notice, they are the ones who watched me. The old man handed me Polaroid pictures of the shrine, each dotted with a thin wraith of yellow-orange. I handed them back one by one, carefully touching only the edges. Some of the fire shapes had ears, others had long, sinewy bodies. One was merely a tail hanging on nothing. And we end up we always end up back at this central passage, which is named Bonfire. So what's cool about this, I think, is, an additional cool thing about this work is, if we minimize this, we can see it. We are in Firewheel right now, and you can actually see the shape that we were just looking at if we go down into Firewheel. If I can click on it the right way. There's a button to go into it, but I can't remember which button. So I think it's, if I click like this, it'll take me down. Yeah, so this is Firewheel. This is what we were just reading. And these are the passages, or the lexia, that make up Firewheel. So remember how we were reading, like, we can read Bonfire, which is here, and it's kind of it's kind of the center of this particular story. I don't know if you heard what my son was just yelling, but I didn't catch all of it, but he told somebody not to do something or they were going to get a knuckle sandwich. He has the most, arcane threats sometimes. Anyway, so this is the center, but what's interesting about it is she's visually arranged the lexia so that they appear the way that, to match the shape of the quilt pattern that she's describing here. And so these also are structured in ways that follow sequences related to those patterns. We can also, we can show the links if we want to see it that way. It's quite complicated, as you can see. But we can also show the text. Again, it's quite small, but it's kind of there, and it's almost like a debugging view for the author, I think. But she's given us access to these things. We can also view it this way. Oh, this is cool. I forgot about this view. So she's found ways to make these stories structured in ways that follow the patterns of quilt patterns, but in this sense, the bonfire is kind of the center, and all these little things that you can wander away from the fire for a little bit, but you always come back, and you're always kind of back here to see what's, if you imagine camping and there's a big bonfire, you kind of gravitate towards the fire, and you kind of stay, even if it's not super cold, you still end up kind of hanging out by the fire, and you might go away for a while, but you kind of come back. So this idea of a fire is something that is accomplished through the structure here, but also the text. And let's see, how do I zoom up? Is this up? Yeah, okay. So then we can also look at some of these different ones. Let's see, seed voices, and you can kind of see how we zoom down into it. This one's got multiple layers that we can zoom into. It's a little wonky sometimes, but we got these clusters, right? So let's see. Let's take a look here. No, I didn't want to zoom into that. I wanted to read it. So if I click the title, I think. There it is. Okay. Oh God, honestly, of course you don't want this thing. It's not like you can love it or anything, so why in hell are you looking at me like that? What is it? What could I have possibly done to you? So you can see how you click through these things and it kind of takes you in and out and back. I'm not really giving you a good sense of what this work is about just because I wanted to show you the structure. And I think the structure is super interesting in this work, so that's why I'm showing it to you. But I realize that by showing you just the structure, it is missing the main part of it. I do wish I could assign this for you all in a way that you could actually read it. It's also worth noting too, some of these works you might think, well, why don't we just adapt it to Twine? Why don't we use Twine to create this kind of thing? And to some extent you can for certain works. I think you could probably do Lust, but for any of these that involve the spatial arrangement of these things or rely on that for part of their meaning, you can't do it in Twine at all. This idea is completely not visible in Twine. Even if you made your somehow made your passage view visible in Twine, which you would have to seriously hack it to make that happen. I've never seen anyone try that, actually. I think it's theoretically possible, but no one's tried it that I know of. You still couldn't have that sort of zooming in and zooming out concept that you see here in Story Space, and that's a important contribution that they've made. So you can see this little kind of pinwheel pattern. That's the pattern that this particular group of Lexia are making, or they were before I moved that one. Excuse me. So this is Samplers, and that's Dina Larson's work. She is most well known actually for a work called Marble Springs, which is a massive work that she published in Story Space, but it's also available on the web as a wiki, essentially. So she keeps adding to it, and it is still growing, I think. She also did an early version of, I think it was Marble Springs, but she did an early hypertext work on a shower curtain. So it was physically laid out, like literally shower curtain, and she'd written the passages of the Lexia on like index cards and then connected them with string, and then that's how she was able to visualize it physically before she was able to put it into code. So yeah, Dina Larson's an interesting creator and someone who has done a lot in the electronic literature community to help find other writers and encourage their growth and kind of build a kind of workshop sense around hypertext writing. She still does that a lot, actually. I mean, she's on there's a Discord server. If you are interested in these kinds of things, I'm sure you could find her on Discord and get her feedback on your hypertext work. So let's take a look here. So that's the other one I wanted to show you on this system is pretty different. Actually, I might not get to Afternoon a Story, which is ironic because it's usually the one that people start with. This is probably the most well known from this period. No, I'll take it back. I will demonstrate Afternoon really briefly, but I have another work here that I like better, so I want to just show that to you. So Afternoon a Story, here we go. So the same, digital Windows version of Afternoon here running in Story Space. Afternoon a Story was the first, but certainly the first like prominent work produced in Story Space. I think, in fact, Michael Joyce helped develop Story Space so that he could produce this work. It is, I would think, novel length. It is quite large. It got a lot of press as being essentially like the vindication of computers as a literary device, and it has been widely studied. If you find the ELMSIP entry on it, on that database, it's got lots and lots of people referencing it and talking about it. You can also find on YouTube, Michael Joyce has recently, he's done a couple of traversals like this of himself reading the work, and so I can direct you to that if you'd like. That's a way to kind of see the whole work in a sense, because you can see him narrating it and reading it. So let's see. I try to recall winter as if it were yesterday, she says, but I do not signify one way or another. By 5, the sun sets, and the afternoon melt freezes again across the blacktop into crystal octopi and palms of ice, rivers and continents beset by fear, and we walk out to the car, the snow moaning beneath our boots and oaks exploding in series along the fence line on the horizon, the shrapnel settling like relics, the echoing thundering off far ice. This was the essence of wood, these fragments say, and this darkness is air. Poetry, she says, without emotion, one way or another. Do you want to hear about it? So no, this one ends in a question, so we can actually click yes. I guess we could click no too, I'm not sure what happens. She had been a client of Wirt's wife for some time, nothing serious, nothing awful, merely general unhappiness and the need of a woman so strong to have friends. It goes on, I mean, so basically there's, you can click on words like we've seen. I'm just blasting through it here, obviously. You can look at the list of links and jump through it. The main character, Wirt, is having an affair, I believe, or is he already divorced? I can't remember. But the central question in this is that he raises a question, and I didn't get it in this particular read, but usually you get it very early on. There's a central question in the story where he asks himself, or he says to us, I want to say that I may have seen my son die this morning. He passes a car accident on his way to work, and he realizes that it's the same car as his ex-wife, and his son may have been with her, and so that's the question ultimately as you're reading it. And whether or not that's true depends on choices you make in the story. So whether or not it turns out to be him in the car depends on things that you don't think you're choosing. Like, you don't think you're choosing either outcome. You make choices as you work your way through it, and depending on how you work your way through it, that may or may not be true. Also, the narrator Wirt may have caused the accident sometimes. So it's a profound work. It's very large. I think the writing is excellent. I think it's a beautiful. Just the prose is beautiful. It reminds me of a bit of Don DeLillo, but not as like harsh as Don DeLillo, if that makes sense. But similarly, kind of literary fiction. Like it's something that you spend some time kind of chewing on the words, and I think it does really reward that. So the other one I wanted to show you with the last few minutes here, and maybe spend a little bit more time with, because I enjoyed this work and I haven't had a chance to look at it until recently. I was not able to get a version of Windows working that would let me run this until like yesterday. So I kind of got this working a while ago, and just to prove that my copy of the disk worked, but I finally got a version that's actually readable, so I'm really happy with that. So this is a work called Califia. Sorry, it's mirrored, but you can kind of see the artwork. The style is pretty striking. This is by M.D. Coverley. It's a hypertext work. It was published in the year 2000, but it does not use story space. It uses a different system, which I can't remember the name of, but this is the only work I've ever seen in this made with this particular system, so I don't remember what it's actually called. I'll look that up later, but you'll see it looks pretty different. I don't want to mess up my jewel case here. Remember CDs? Remember CD cases, how fragile they are? You know, when you have these essentially pretty rare literary works, you want to be careful with your jewel cases. But this one's broken many years ago. Okay, so this is a work called Califia by M.D. Coverley, or that's a pen name. Her real name is Marjorie Lucebrink. So here we go. It does have sound. I don't know how loud it's going to be, because I won't be able to hear it. But if it's super loud, then I guess let me know. So it's a very visual work, as you can see. Once there was an island called California where dreams came true. Come ashore. And you can see these little like footsteps. That's always kind of the clue, or not really clue, but the cue, I guess, to follow. So as she says, come ashore. I'm just going to kind of read through and explore this. If you have anything you'd like for me to look at as you see it come up here, let me know. On the day after my father was buried, I began digging on the hill behind the house in Whitley Heights. The air was hot and the wind was rising. It was dawn, so clear you could see all the way to Catalina. I started at the south end of the terrace and walked in a straight line across the grass, through the flower bed, out of the sun, and into the filtered shade beneath the eucalyptus trees. So far, so good. At a boulder marked with fading red paint, I began to dig. All I needed was to find the gold coins hidden away for such an emergency as this. So we have these. This is the name of this particular, I guess slide is probably a better way to think of this. We also do have this navigational device. It's kind of hard to see, but you can click on different compass points, I think. Maybe not. We can at least follow this one. Oh, here we go. So this is to the reader. We are seeking assistance in discovering a cache of gold. The gold was originally mined in the Sierras, then brought to Los Angeles in the 1850s. It was reburied in the Southern California hills, but through foul play or a California mix-up, knowledge of the actual location was lost. The stash is known as the Treasure of Califia. Some of these things don't actually work anymore. So what you eventually discover as you explore this work is it actually is more, not quite a game, I don't think, but you're following several different characters who are in different ways looking for this treasure at different times in history, or through different generations. So it really becomes a story of a family, but also the story of California as an identity of what it means to be a Californian. So you've got kind of this navigation rose thing. You can move using this compass. You've got archives. Yeah, so you can look up close at different documents here. These are like presented as archives, like documental archives. There is sound. I guess I'll play this and see how loud it is. If it works. It might not even work. Yeah, it doesn't look like it's playing any audio. Maybe it is, but I can't hear anything. So, well, in any case, I did actually get the sound working last night, but then I couldn't turn it off. So, like the music just kept looping, and I had to kill it. Anyway, let's move on to the archives. So, this is like a pop out from the main thing. We can kind of go through here. Here's the family tree of all the characters. So this ends up being a really complicated work ultimately. But it's definitely hypertext in the sense that we have different names, different characters that we can kind of click on, but it's much more graphically oriented. It's much more of a visual work than Afternoon of Story, which is pure text basically. But yeah, we're just kind of browsing our way through this. Like anything, it takes a while to get essentially oriented to it, and the feeling that you're always kind of looking for more, and then you discover something that you haven't, that you didn't realize was there, is often the case with this kind of work. But she essentially had to create the all of this kind of structure herself. MD Coverley did. Let me see if I can see, what is this system? I don't know what system this is. I forget what this is called. Author? Didn't work. Okay. Oops, I didn't mean to do that. Let me start it over again. So it's published by Eastgate, but not using StorySpace, basically. So it's a different way of thinking about hypertext. And I think this one actually would probably adapt to Twine okay. It's just that you would have to recreate each slide graphically. And I have actually thought about like what one you would need to do. I think that the only thing that would be really impossible that I can think, or just really impractical, would be the way that there's that like mosaic transition between those. I think that would be pretty tricky to do. Califia, the roadhead, south, the comments in the yard. Cool. Let's view some landmarks in the south. Golden Days, Nellie Claire, the sea, Tejon, Willing Stars, the paths. Let's check out Golden Days. Or Nellie Claire. Or the sea. Yeah, some of these links are not working. I don't know if this is, I think it's just things like this could just be a problem with the way that I'm emulating it. It might not be able to find the resources that it needs. Story so far. Augusta tells about the days following the death of her father, Jack Summerland, her project to dig up the comets, her mother in Paradise Home, and the messages from the man from Wind Power, Milton Kramer. She also explains how Kay and Calvin came to her aid. The Tejon letters cover Samuel Walker's separation from Christian Beveridge, his meeting with Willing Stars, and some cryptic information about the stash of gold. In Willing Star's story, we find out about the history of the Chumash Indians in California and Willing Star's Odyssey. So this is the kind of work that you essentially accumulate a sense of it as you explore it, and eventually it does all come together. I think I remember vividly my first reading of this work and how it suddenly all clicked, and it was this beautiful thing. Oh, hey, this link works now. Yeah, you often get like, you get sometimes ways to organize this that make a little bit more sense, or that are meant to look like web pages, and so that helps navigate it. Anyway, so that's a different way of thinking about hypertext even than StorySpace. And also certainly different than you would experience on Twine or any kind of web-based hypertext today. So I hope that was interesting. I want to spend a little bit more time with Afternoon of Story. I might do that Friday, and also on Friday, I don't know where it went. But I have another one I want to show you on Friday, which is Patchwork Girl by Shelly Jackson. So she wrote My Body of Wonder Camera, which you've read for today, and I'm interested in discussing with you on Wednesday. But also, her more well-known work is Patchwork Girl, but it requires StorySpace. Eastgate Systems, the publisher, did make a version of it that you can play on a contemporary Mac computer. So I'm going to show you that. And it also includes the original. So I have not done this yet, but I'm going to see if I can get it running, get that original version installed and running on my pretend Mac computer right here. I'm not sure if that's going to work because I have to do some tricky transferring, but we'll see. So that was it. We're about out of time, so let me just kind of review what we did today. Hopefully you've all been able to add some things to the doc. Let's see. Not yet, but please do. All right, so those were the works that I talked about today, So these are the works that I demoed. I looked at especially Califia most recently, but samplers, and I have said nothing I spent some significant time with, and I'll be talking about Patchwork Girl on probably Friday and probably afternoon on Friday as well. but they may come up just in passing on Wednesday. But I'll try to demo Patchwork Girl on Friday. Okay, so that is it for today's stream because it's 11 o'clock, but I hope that was interesting. And I hope that as you read about these works in electronic literature, the book, that they will have a little bit more concreteness because you'll feel like, okay, this makes sense when I see it. Okay, so thanks everyone. I will wrap it up here. What is this Garfield comic? I don't get the joke. I don't understand what you're doing, Patrick. I can't read it. It's too small. Okay, well, was that supposed to be a meme? All right, well, yes, Patrick. Oh, Garfield. Nice. Okay. Thank you for that explanation, and I appreciate that a lot. All right. Thanks, everyone. I'll wrap up the stream. I'll see everyone later on Wednesday. Today, this is week 6, right? So this will be an even week. So I'll see even cohorts on Wednesday. Okay, take care. Have a good day. I'll switch. Well, I would switch to the bird camp, but there's nothing there, so I'll just stop the stream. Okay, see you later.